was just saying that I've been watching a lot of Walking Dead, rewatching, I should say, with my son Ethan. And some people think it's entertainment, but I think it's training.
It's really going to happen.
It's going to happen. You've got to be ready for every possibility.
Right.
I think I may have taken it too far though, when this morning he asked me if he had a steel bat, how many zombies do I think he could take out? So,
and you entertained this inquiry with all seriousness.
We took it to quite a few. It depends what's the space like? How many are there? What's the zombie density?
What's brought you to this apocalyptic mood? What are you reading?
Just always be ready. Just be ready for it. I've been listening to a lot of Gary Stevenson as well.
Right.
Economist. Very worth a listen. He's just written a book apparently. Can't remember what it's called, but he was a top trader, Citibank, but council estate lad, done well, and now he's an inequality economist.
Inequality economist.
So he talks about the difference, the kind of the gulf between the rich and everybody else, and how that's getting wider and wider.
Exactly. I'm quite interested in that. I read out some stats to you the other day on that, didn't I? In America, especially, because we're going their way.
Yeah.
Where something like a few hundred people own 80% of the wealth of the country, but most startlingly, 3 people own 50% of the wealth.
It's crazy.
Privately owned wealth in the US, which is just amazing.
But he said even then, I looked at the data on it, because he was talking about house prices and income ratio. And in America, it's 4. So average house price is 4 times
fairly
income.
Affordable, yeah.
Over here is 9. He said if you don't think it can get much worse than that, you're kidding yourself. You go to Sao Paulo, we go to Philippines, go to Tokyo, go to Hong Kong, where it's up at nearly 30, 40 times income.
Yeah.
So that's why we've got to be ready, people.
With the apocalypse now training course.
Backup plan. I can't tell you what it is though.
No, exactly.
That's the first rule of prepping.
Yeah, we shouldn't even tell us that you've got a backup. You shouldn't even tell us that we need a backup plan, because then we'll start thinking about it.
Exactly. I could just
need to be the only survivor.
I've lost my competitive advantage, but that's how much I care. See.
She's sharing that with our listeners. So the only people that survive the apocalypse are the listeners of the SME Growth Podcast. Well, they're
a hardy bunch. They have to listen to us.
Listen to us and stay alive. Come the apocalypse. I think it's time to get a bit serious. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. I'm Dave Parry, and with me again is Rich Buckle.
Good to be here.
We've been just 2 of us for a couple of weeks, haven't we? We've had some guests on. So it's nice to be back.
Yep.
So as ever, we're going to try and come up with some interesting topics for you if you're an owner or manager of a small or medium-sized enterprise, an SME, especially focused on the UK businesses. And we come up a whole variety of topics, and today's no exception. We're going to be talking about possibly a subject you don't spend very much time thinking about, perhaps you should, which is your tech stack. What's it costing you? What are the risks? And what are you missing out on? So we'll cover a bit of that in a minute.
Yep.
Bit of news though, just to start the podcast off. Today we had the latest inflation figures, down to 3.4%, widely predicted, of course, as we're coming off the big spike from when the oil price went up after Ukraine invasion. So we're down to 3.4 now, lowest in 2.5 years.
Carriage predicting will come back down, and then interest rates are going to come down as well.
Yeah.
And then watch the asset price boom.
Around property and shares in the next couple of years. Well, all that money's got to go somewhere, right? And it's been drawn into savings products getting 4-5%. So it's going to go somewhere.
So top tip there.
Top tip, get ready. Buy now? Is it buy now, or is it not the right time?
Well,
is this
I guess the problem is
financial advice you're giving?
It's not financial advice without prejudice. But yeah, who's going to, if asset prices go too high, who buys? Mm-hmm. And then you find, the likes of BlackRock are buying up houses now, aren't they? Institutional investors are buying up residential properties.
Wow.
Anyway, we'll stop there. Otherwise, this whole episode's going to dive down there.
We'll be back down
with tinfoil hats.
If you haven't listened to the Roger Martin Fag, an episode a couple of weeks ago, go and listen to that, and then come back. One thing I did notice though about the inflation stats is every now and again they change what's in the basket of goods. Did you see that? And just in this revision is air fryers.
Okay.
Interesting. And vinyl records.
Oh, right.
And out of a couple of things, rotisserie chicken. There's a thing.
Air fryers, haven't
no one was
maybe
that's maybe that's it.
Doing your own.
Hand sanitizer.
That's a pretty,
What was that,
Giving up
Telling
on
your grandkids about that, wouldn't you?
I know a couple of people who've still probably got...
still got some?
Garages full of hand sanitizer.
I think we got a 5-litre refill container in the store cupboard that hasn't been opened. Anyway, there's a little bit of business news for you. So today's episode, we're going to talk about tech stacks. Now, before everyone goes snooze and thinks this isn't for me, just bear in mind some of the stats we've uncovered from this. How much money the average company spends on it, what the average is for like salespeople, what should have, how much of that spend is probably wasted because you're not using it anymore, and then some of all the risks around it. And if you think your IT department are on top of this, think again. They're not. It's too distributed. Anyone can sign up for a browser-based product. You don't need admin rights on your machine. And if they've got a credit card, it might even be going through expenses without even your accounts department being able to add it up. So it's quite a subject, actually, when you start reading about it. And some companies are now starting to get platform audits done, either do them internally or get companies, we can come in and do this sort of thing, where you try and go around and get an assessment of all the different apps that are being used by different people, how they all connect, and whether you've got some redundancy in there or not.
Yep.
So there's a few interesting ones. But first off, have a guess. How many average apps do you think there are in a typical small company in use at any one time? Bearing in mind we're a reasonably smallish company, a micro enterprise, fewer than 10 employees. Imagine how many typical sort of 10 to 100 employee firm might be using.
Individual apps, not individual. I don't know, 150.
Yeah, well, the average is about 100, so there'll be some up at 150, and obviously some very small ones not using it at all. Yeah. But yeah, that's quite surprising. That's certainly more than one per employee. It's probably come up to maybe 10 per employee. And then as you get to the slightly bigger firms, it goes up even more. Maybe medium-sized companies doing 200-300 employees, they could have 200 apps in line, and it keeps going up from there. So it's almost like the bigger the company is, the more apps there's likely to be.
Well, it's so easy to sign up, isn't it? You see something. I mean, I see a lot of stuff on Instagram. See it there, new product, new this, that, the other. Right, okay, have a look at that. Or someone mentioned something on another podcast, and you think, oh, that's interesting. I'll go and have a look at that. And it's 2 seconds to sign up.
Well, one click sometimes. There's an AI app yesterday that turned an image into a video. I thought, I'll give it a go, see what the latest is on that. And all I have to do is click one button that says sign in with Google. So I signed in with Google, and now I've got an account. And I had to play with it. I thought it was rubbish, but I couldn't cancel it. I couldn't unsign in with Google. Yeah. I could log out, obviously, but now that app has got my credentials. Yeah. Okay, I'm not paying for it, and what we're talking about today is more the paid-for apps.
Well, I think it's the saying, what's the strategy? What's your SaaS tech stack strategy?
Your SaaS strat.
Your SaaS strat. Is that a thing, is it? Or we just made
we just made it up.
Excellent. You heard it here first, SaaS strat. But yeah, rather than have an ad hoc approach, not only from a compliance point of view, but also just from how does this all link together to give a really good experience to customers or...
And I wonder who the best person is to do that, because I bet you most owners, managers, CEOs listening will think that's what the IT department do. But they're not the users a lot of the time of this stuff, are they? They're policemen, they install it. And in the old days when you had to install it on your machine, they had a lot of control over it. But to be able to try something and then dismiss it or try it and love it, you need to be a user.
You've got to take a bit of a bird's eye view on it as well, haven't you? And almost say, well, if we had a blank sheet of paper, what kind of experience would we want to give to a customer or client? What technology at each touch point, what would we like to do? Yeah. Not all of that's going to be possible. Okay, but let's have a look then at what tools are available to say, well, we could maybe use this, something like Loom to do a presentation where you can record yourself and talk it through with someone as if you're there in the room with them talking about the proposal or something like that. Just another little touch of personalization, and they have stats around what the increase in conversion rates are if you've got somebody that's talking you through the proposal as opposed to just sending them the whole proposal.
Yeah, and it works well, yeah. So keep a list of all the different app names we mentioned in the program today. See if we can get to 100.
See if we can get an affiliate link or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think having that strategic overview of it then allows you to maybe direct the traffic a little bit more and really think about what are we doing with this.
Well, and you're thinking there specifically around the front end bit, the customer interactions, the salespeople and all that, but there's so many other things that happen internally, back office type stuff, enabling productivity tools, that actually that bird's eye view you talk about is incredibly wide in reach, the whole customer journey, but everything else that anybody internally does.
Well, and this is why I think it's probably more of a board level type of discussion. Or
I'd just be nervous though if somebody heard that and thought, right, well, let's clamp down on it or let's not do as much of it. I think there's probably benefit maybe in going wide first and try lots of things, but make sure you got some method of closing things down again or choosing best in breed. Because you might find in a reasonably sized organization, 100, 150 employees, that the same problem is being solved in different ways in different departments, when in fact it probably wasn't much difference between whether you decided to go for this project management tool or that project management tool.
You must need a SaaS amnesty, don't you? Everybody hand them in.
Fess up.
But I think that's a good point, because I think you don't want to stifle people's creativity, and if someone comes across something that they use and they think this is really good, then great. But I think having some form of direction around it, a bit like marketing spend, 75% on what works, 25% on experimental. But I think there is the potential, I think, particularly for smaller businesses, to really leverage this stuff to drive some productivity, which is what we had Roger Martin-Fag talking about the other day on the podcast, wasn't it?
Well, especially, and now AI is the fastest growing sector, 85% growth in the last year of SaaS products that have some AI element to it. And whether they all have or not, I don't know, because it's a great marketing hook, isn't it? You say you've got AI in your tool. But with that coming through now, the potential for productivity improvement is phenomenal. If well used. There's a lot of rubbish out there as well, so you've got to harness it.
Yeah.
And you're right, you don't want to stifle that productivity exploration, I suppose. Where people
we'll probably be launching an AI-enabled chat thing on our website in the next week or so.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah, we've been working on that.
The Well Meadow website and have a little look.
So in terms of total spend, once again, if that's the number of apps we've talked about and the proliferation of them, your average small to medium-sized company is probably spending a couple of $100,000, according to research I found online from the SoftwareAsAService Market Insights report. Now, a couple of $100,000 is quite a lot for a smallish firm, but as you go up through the size of the firms, it's amazing how that's picking up. Because not only have you got those more apps you talked about, a lot of them are paid for by user, per user. So if you're using Slack, for example, there's a free version, but as soon as you go to a certain number, you start paying and it accelerates up. So we've got figures here that are up to a couple of £1 million a year for a mid-cap company. Company maybe doing 30 to 50 million in turnover, could be spending 2 million. Which is incredible. And by the time you go up to the enterprise level, it could be £5 million a year on SaaS products.
Wow.
Which is incredible. And it's growing at 5 to 10% a year. So before you know it, it's going to be a major component of your spend. But if that's a productivity gain, and as long as it's well chosen, maybe that's a good investment.
Well, I think that's there. It's back to that. You've got to keep an eye on what it is, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and what it's costing you, and are you getting the value for money from it? Those sorts of things. Then if you could get the same productivity gain for 4 million spend rather than 5 million spend, then great. And I think that's where it's some of these articles talking about where's the waste, isn't it? Identifying those duplicate accounts, or like we've seen, and I'm sure we're as guilty of it as probably everyone else is. When people leave and they've got SaaS products, do you take them off quick enough? Do you even know they've got them? There's all sorts of ways here that you can.
Well, this ties in nicely to your opener, because they call those zombie apps.
Do they? See?
Zombie apps.
Be prepared, people.
So zombie apps are those where someone's left and they're still costing you money potentially, or even if not costing you money, they've got access to data which you don't know about, which is constantly being synced to whatever. So there's a real lack of control there. And there's another thing called orphan apps. And orphan apps are where the developer is no longer developing it. So it becomes a security risk because they're not getting the security updates, but you've still got them still linking into your data. So there's all sorts of risks around that. So just for those listening, as I say, I'm aware that because apps are taken on by different people in different parts of the organization, someone who's running a company no one will be able to have the full view of everything that's being used. Yeah. So just listing a few of the biggest ones, you might recognize several of these and you'll know whether you're using them or not. So DocuSign, a lot of companies use DocuSign to get their quote signed, agreement signed. Adobe, the biggest market cap SaaS company in the world, 250 billion valuation or something crazy. IBM do loads. Dropbox, we use Dropbox a lot. The business version of that is very good if you want that sort of very robust distributed non-server type solution. Salesforce are up there. It's the one name that people often come up with, isn't it, from a sales or CRM point of view. Atlassian, whole suite of products around Atlassian, design stuff. Microsoft, nearly everybody that we speak to is on the Microsoft stack for the Office 365, with a few exceptions that have gone the Google route. Zendesk, They do support tickets and some CRM stuff. HubSpot, everyone knows of our allegiance to HubSpot and how big that is. Workday, SAP, Google. You can spend a lot on Google for a free product. It's amazing you can do that. Oracle, Shopify. So they're the big ones that companies may already be aware whether or not they're using. But there'll be a whole load of other ones at the next level down. And the main categories are CRM. We talked about a couple there in that list, didn't we? The ERP system. And people think about that as their accounting system, but as we all know, there's so much more to it. And I don't know if people would guess the third one, but HR management.
Okay.
That tends to cost quite more than people think. Because it's hard these days to run an HR department without some sort of HR management software. All the data and GDPR and people leaving and joining and payroll and letters and all that sort of thing. But of course, that's another per user cost. And HR is a cost center, isn't it? It's not a revenue, so they get budget for it and they pay it. So it's interesting to think how many other products there are. We'll list a few more in a minute. So what are the other main risks then? We talked there about the zombie products and the orphan products where people either leave or the developer stops supporting something. We mentioned earlier as well about that almost security risk of the data. Who's controlling what data is connected to what? And it could well be that through a series of different connected products, something that you didn't think had access to, say, your accounts, can get it through, 2 steps removed or whatever.
I think we see as well, I had a situation yesterday where things like WordPress websites, which again is another big SaaS product.
We could do a whole episode on WordPress websites. And most people listening will have a WordPress website.
Plugin conflicts
that
cause issues. So you've got various, it's very easy to add a plugin into a website, but not all. So who's developed it? Where has it come from? Even if it's not malicious, it could just be that certain bits of code are after the same bits of data that then cause a conflict and all of those sorts of things. So you could end up with that kind of issue. Which is why we are moving away from all of the WordPress websites we use.
We used to do it all the time, didn't we? And it was fine. It was okay before other options came about. Nowadays there are lots of other options. There's Wix and Squarespace for the smaller businesses. We put all ours on HubSpot for obvious reasons. Gives other benefits, but there's it's funny how WordPress managed to get a dominance in the business website market, and now that's slowly ebbing away, isn't it, as other competitors come onto the landscape. But integration, that's another. That's a big concern as well. Do you have single source of the truth? Is there ever a double data entering bit? And we talked a lot about apps there, but don't ignore the Excel spreadsheet, the ubiquitous Excel spreadsheet. Everybody's got a load of critical business data on a desktop somewhere.
Do you know there's a world championship for Excel?
There's a world championship for Excel?
Yeah. There's the people it's a full-on, it's a real thing, competition that you can go to and you can test your Excel skills. And they have rooms full of people and it's all on a big screen and everyone's got to solve certain equations or solve certain problems.
Like a computer game type thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And yet there's a world champion Excel user.
Right.
So watch this space.
I don't know why that made me think of this, but in this week's Private Eye, one of the cartoons is a graph. And the title of the graph is Number of Useless Graphs in the World. And it's going up.
Going up.
Only tickled me that.
I think governance as well is another thing people should be aware of. Sort of involved in a situation with a client at the moment where someone has developed a piece of software that you're then talking about who's it's a SaaS product, but who's got ownership of it, who's looking after the data, what are the governance. I think sometimes with SaaS products, particularly the development of them, you can get so carried away with the use case that it's who owns this data?
I find people turn a blind eye to that. Who is the data controller? Who's the data processor? Where's the data being stored? And we've got some clients that are particularly, and rightly so, conscious about that. Some of them are even ISO 27000, I think is the right standard, isn't it? The data one. And if they're compliant to that, they're going to be very, very hot on where's the data, who's the data controller and stuff. But nearly everything that's available these days is also, not saying nearly everything. Starts off with everything was US-based, and now there are a lot of products that offer a UK-based, EU-based server for storing the data. But even with those, so HubSpot do that, don't they? It took them a few years. It's only been the last 3 years or so that they've offered an EU.
Because was that all driven by the Patriot Act, wasn't it? I think was it the Patriot Act that allowed the US deep state
to access all data.
or the NSA, I think, could access all data.
Right. Well, I know it was an EU ruling, whether it's triggered by that or
because of the
GDPR
element around things, it meant that a lot of the companies had to relocate servers.
And they're trying to say Safe Harbor did the same job in the US. But anyway, so that triggered them to set up the option now that when you set up an account, you can have it EU-based. But some of the tools that are on it are plugins and third-party things which are only US-based.
Yeah.
So you've got to be very careful, even when you think you've done the right job at the beginning of checking that the software you've chosen is EU-based and it's got the right controls around it. As soon as you add a plugin to it, and nearly everything these days is moving towards platform status with plugins, and Salesforce and Xero and HubSpot are absolute classics for it. You've got to watch about all those. You know, where are they based and where's their data? So yeah, interesting to think about the governance side and who owns it all, where's that data going?
Yeah. Performance, reliability, those sorts of things as well. Important to think about.
Especially if it's business critical.
Yeah.
You know, how critical is something? We were talking about that the other day, weren't we? We have a client that wants us to do an integration job for them, and we've developed a solution to integrate HubSpot with some on-premise stuff, which is fine. But we had to ask ourselves first, was that business critical? If that link failed and we're remote, does that stop production, stop sales? Or is it a nice to have information reporting type tool? So I don't think you want to be exposing yourself to too much mission critical risk there by taking on non-robust solutions.
And I think as well, just how quickly can you do things with it? So again, without wanting to just be a blatant sales advert for HubSpot, but using HubSpot because it is reliable and because it is quick means that you just don't have. So, for example, we just built our website. We rebuilt our website over the last, feels like eternity, but it's been a while. But it's very quick to build because the software is well thought through. It's very easy to change things and adjust things. You've got a lot of flexibility, but you've also got that good performance there, which means that you don't waste a lot of time. Whereas there's lots of badly designed SaaS products that can actually cost you quite a bit of time and doesn't quite do the job, or you just spend time going over things again, or it doesn't quite do what you hoped it would do.
Yeah, I suppose that makes me think straight away that if you're going for something that is mission critical, go safe. Never got fired buying IBM, that type of approach. But also the people at the forefront of exploring new things and getting that productivity gain are probably choosing products that are much less mature, because the bigger ones aren't doing it yet. Yeah. So there's got to be a balance of risk there, haven't you? But it comes back to that, is it mission critical? So do you risk analysis on that? If this falls over, does the whole company stop? Or is it just I've lost that productivity gain that I previously had and I can go back to doing it the old way, whatever that may be. I think the whole lack of control IT-wise, because that comes in when you're training new starters. You know, who's updating the onboarding program? You know, if there's 100 apps in any average small company, has anybody actually thought, well, how do we onboard new employees for that? And something we found, we added it to our policies a couple of years ago, but offboarding, it never used to be a big problem really. When everybody was using on-premise software, they didn't have their access to their email account anymore, so they were gone. But now everyone can access all these apps from any laptop anywhere. Whether they've left your company or not, they may still be able to log in with, even if it's the old work email, they don't have to be able to receive the emails necessarily. They could just use it as their login, and if they remembered their password, they still have access to all of your stuff. So I wonder how many companies listening have got a robust offboarding process to make sure that any leaving employee
and what's the passwords just on those. So there's been some shockers where people have said, okay, they're leaving, and what's your password for this? And you think, oh my goodness, like what's going on with that? So it's kind of, you've got to just make sure that, I mean, we use things like LastPass, which is another SaaS product that just it gives you that ability to...
I'll add that to my bingo list, LastPass.
So, it just gives that ability to control passwords and remove people from SaaS products quite easily. Yeah. But
now, there's another interesting stat I found, which is that between 10 and 30% of a company's SaaS spend is wasted. Now, that could be like one of these 72% of statistics are made up. Type numbers on the spot. But nevertheless, even if it's not zero, right? Yeah. There's a non-zero amount of money that every company is probably wasting. And we've been trying to cancel that blinking 5G dongle for the last 6 months. Yeah. And we can't get the right login, or whoever it is that we got it through can't cancel it or something. So we're stuck paying 30 quid a month because we can't cancel it. And there was that other one yesterday. I was trying to say, well, we don't use that anymore. Let's cancel that. But we've signed up for a year at a time. So we have to wait till September anyway. And then when you click the button to turn off the automatic renewal, it says you have to contact us and we'll put in a ticket. And you think, well, they're just going to hope I've forgotten that now because that may not happen and it'll come up for renewal. And that was a £2,000 a year spend, wasn't it, on that particular product?
Well, it was quite enlightening, wasn't it, when we actually added up what we were spending on SaaS.
Yeah.
And it was...
well, we just read the stats there, didn't we? Average of £200,000 for a small company, but bear in mind small could be up to 50 to 100 employees, let's say. We're at the smaller end of that. But we'd still spend a good, not quite £200,000, but tens of thousands of pounds on SaaS products, which is... you've got to bear in mind everything is in there. So you've got our Microsoft licenses for everybody. We've got all our backup stuff we do, the Dropbox, the expensive one, HubSpot's in there. But there's all the other things we've talked about. The LastPass, that's of a cost, our accounting software, Adobe Creative Suite, all those sort of things. So it's quite sobering to think, even just on a cost management basis, let's have a process for killing off the ones we no longer use, or if we found a better one, make sure we're not still paying for the old one. Make sure the people that are leaving are, to start with, removed as their user seat off the software that we were paying for them anyway. And if they were one of the last few or the champion of it and no one else wants it, kill the whole thing off.
Well, I think you can fall into the trap as well, can't you, of using... So there was a particular piece of software, sort of process mapping, Miro, that we sort of use quite heavily.
Yeah.
But I use it quite a lot for mapping out various processes or web designs or whatever we're trying to work out, workflows in HubSpot or whatever. Just use Miro for that. But because I use it quite a lot, I think everybody else does. And when I actually went and looked at it, we had 6 licenses that was... I was the only one that was going in.
Yeah.
No one else was. But I would say, credit to Miro, it was very, very simple to knock all the licenses down and then just move it from £60 a month to £10 a month. And
that's quite good.
I've still got the tool, I'm using it, but we're not wasting money. But from their point of view, they made it incredibly straightforward and simple to do.
Yeah,
so
you don't mind so much then.
You build the trust then, don't you? Because you think, well, if we have a need...
good on them. And you've given
back.
them kudos for that on air, and others will hear that and maybe feel more positive towards them. But I want to make sure that we don't get the wrong message coming across here. We're not trying to say to everybody, cancel all your SaaS products. It's all just a waste of money. We're just saying be careful. There is this risk of proliferation. And the other stat, which I got out of a SaaS market review on the Technopedia website, says that SaaS-powered workplaces are about 30% more efficient than non-SaaS powered workplaces. So back to your Roger Martin Fagg comment about automation and AI. This isn't about robots on the shop floor. This is about using tools that are productivity enhancing tools, even in an office environment. Remember, 80% of the economy is a service economy, isn't it? And you could be 30% more efficient if you open up access to more and more SaaS products. So we're not saying don't use them. We're saying actually use them. We use a lot.
Yeah.
But we're just sharing some learnings about the fact that it can get out of control, especially with leavers and churner people.
We were having this discussion last night at the dinner table, and I was showing wife and kids the latest NVIDIA presentation where they've used some new chip and OpenAI to program robots.
Oh, this is the one we were listening to.
It's a different one. It's another one. So it's a different one from the fruit one that's been
I've been sharing that one. Yeah.
But this is about how to train robots using virtual reality, human movement that then the robot can mimic. So it's like robot mimicry of what it looks amazing. Whether or not we're heading towards some dystopian hellscape or whether this is
this is the robot learning from humans.
Yeah.
That's assuming that the humans got the best way of doing it, right?
Yeah, but things like, I suppose, picking up a glass.
Yeah, sure.
And then it sees that.
So human-like
actions, and it does all that. So it looks really, really incredible what they're doing. But we were talking about it, and my wife said, "Well, AI couldn't sort of sort my job about how would somebody wanted to book a pitch in the square, which is what part of her job,
the market square.
How would they do that?" I said, "Well, just have a chat bot on the screen that they ask and
scarily doable.
But what if they needed this?" And so, well, you just link. What if they wanted to book and pay? Well, it would just link them through to a booking page with a calendar and everything. Oh, but then what if all the documents they need to sign? Well, they could just upload them, and it could just. She's like, "I haven't got a job." I was like, "No, you're right. You work for the council. You'll be fine."
Well, the way councils are going, but you're right. There's always that need for some humans in there somewhere, the human in the loop, famously in this automation. And there are some professions that are perhaps more protected against that than the others, certainly those that need empathy and things that computers can't mimic just yet.
But it's, there's an awful lot of innovation going on there. And I think that's partly, I guess, what we're saying, isn't it? Use SaaS in a way to innovate carefully. Yeah. But just be aware that there can be some pitfalls of unnecessary proliferation.
You're talking more about the AI impact there. Maybe we'll come back to that, again in the future, about where AI is doing that type of thing. It's not so much a productivity improvement at a personal level, making me more productive. It's more at an organizational level. I can do with fewer people, or I can grow without recruiting. But a lot of these other ones are just to get your job done. I think AI is starting to get interesting, and you can see that now coming through with a bit of certainly customer self-serve and maybe some of the creative fields that are starting to see it coming in. But it's just the basics of getting a job done, of selling somebody something, which is a persuasive task. I think that's still a personal thing, and managing that process. And you came up with some stats the other day about the average spend for SaaS for salespeople in particular. In companies that are serious about it, how much they invest in all the software that sits around a salesperson.
Yeah, I think it was a year or so ago I looked at it, but I can't imagine it's changed too much. But it was about £1,000 per software salesperson
per year,
per month.
Wow, so that's £12,000 a year for a salesperson on presumably quite a stack of different products, not one thing. But all the various things, whether it be something that produces quotes, gets documents signed, their CRM system, record a video of them talking through a proposal.
LinkedIn, Sales Nav, all that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And you think you can start, if you've got Salesforce or HubSpot subscription, LinkedIn Stack, whatever else you're using. Yeah. Every other tool that you're trying to get to record calls, Hunter.io, those kind of research tools. Yeah. All of that stuff.
Lead forensics.
But by the time you've added it all up,
it comes to a lot. So about 12,000 a year. Well, I looked up the stat for on average across a whole organisation, not just the salespeople. What's the average in 2023? And it was $9,500 US. So what's that? £7,500, £8,000 per year per employee on SaaS products. Now that includes non-salespeople, but there'll be accounting stuff in there. Mind you, a lot of accounting is still on premise, isn't it? But smaller companies, I think, are adopting more cloud-based stuff. But the other interesting stat I found on that, with that $9,500 thing, is that for smaller companies, they spend more per employee when they're quite small, just because they haven't got the buying power. Yeah. And they come up with a stat of 49% more than larger enterprises, because the larger enterprises get much more favourable per seat pricing, and they can probably negotiate down, and maybe they've even got a bit more control over some of these things. So it's a bit more expensive when you're smaller, just because you're buying off the shelf prices. But even that sort of number, I wonder how listeners will compare that with their organisations. The thick end of $10,000, £7,000 or £8,000 a year for every employee. Add that up. See what that comes down to. And the other stat that came from the same report was that 47% of SaaS licenses only 47% are used over a 90-day period.
Right, okay.
So that's quite interesting. Even those where the user or the person who bought it swears by its usefulness, may only pop in every now and again. And there's that whole thing about the toothbrush test, isn't there? You need to be going at least twice a day to sort of a product for it to stick.
Yeah, I thought, was that what you're supposed to do, is it?
With a toothbrush. Yes. Let me introduce you, Richard, to a toothbrush. Shocking. So what are the other? So we talked about the big ones, didn't we? There are lots of smaller ones that we use lots of. Back onto the bingo of naming them all. We talked about the accounting software, Intuit. I've got quite a suite of those, and if you're into QuickBooks and that sort of thing, or Xero, he's a very famous cloud-based one. That's the one that we use. The whole Google G Suite of products, people like that. Adobe, we mentioned, Shopify. Canva, we still use Canva a bit, don't we? Less so these days, used to a lot more. But a lot of companies we see use Canva if they haven't got in-house graphic designers. Yeah. Squarespace, we mentioned. GoDaddy, that always costs more than you think as well. They hook you in with that £1 to buy a domain name, I know, but that's first year only. And then they provide you with some add-on service to stop your address being revealed, and then another add-on service for...
If you get a .ai domain as well, they're quite pricey.
Right.
But there's things like, I mentioned Miro, Slack we use a lot.
Slack,
for internal comms, cut down on internal emails.
Yeah, and other people say, I use Microsoft Teams for that, for the instant messaging. But Slack's just I don't know why, it's just a bit better. Just both. It's quite neat, isn't it? Where you've got all the different channels. And you can direct message people and set up.
I think it's a nice way of compartmentalizing things as well. I think that's what we sort of decided when we say we use Slack for work, email, work comms, stay off WhatsApp. Use that. Everyone wants to use that for private stuff. So,
but it stops emails for sure. The internal email now is just if you have to forward a message, especially if it's got an attachment
on.
But otherwise, we try and put the general comms onto Slack.
But yeah, we use things like Loom. It's quite good for explainer videos.
We even use Dropbox for that as well. Screen recording. Which is quite good.
Canva's got a screen recorder in as well, which is quite good.
Trello we mentioned, it's got a good free option, but you can pay bits for that. It's a nice little sort of move the cards around on a board like a T-card system. Zapier, connecting different things together. Fathom, or another one called Fireflies. We're big fans of that. We mentioned that before. Get that to join your online meetings like in Zoom or Teams, and it'll produce an AI summary of it all. Grammarly, lots of people I see when we're doing screen shares, they've all got Grammarly on. I don't use it myself, but I think that's got a paid for version as well. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of companies have got employees spending their whatever it is per month on Grammarly just to do their spell check, grammar check. Monday.com, all those sort of things. So I'm not sure we got to 100, but we listed quite a lot of apps there. I think the message we're trying to give to people is that don't be frightened of them, embrace them. In fact, actively go out and encourage your employees to explore new ones and be more productive. Be that 30% more productive.
Think strategically about your tech stack because it can have a huge...
Take an interest in it. I just think lots of owners don't even take an interest in it. They haven't got a clue unless the finance person has come up with some sort of summary of what they think they're spending. That's probably not even enough. I think finance and IT people are underestimating it. So don't waste money, but use it well, embrace it, but be careful, especially of that offboarding procedure.
Yeah, and I think as well, if you do find areas where you are not utilizing your SaaS products, well, cancel them, but find something else. There's always going to be some other new product out there that can do what you're looking to. Yeah,
the need is probably still there.
The need is still there. So it's just reallocation of budget really, but make sure that you're utilizing it to grow your business, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. That was a good whistle-stop tour of tech stacks and platform audits. SaaS stack. Our new word of the month. So thank you very much again for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Try and come up with something every week that might be interesting or useful for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises. We're available on all the podcast platforms as well as SMEgrowthpodcast.com. Which is getting some increasing traffic. Just all the episodes are available on there as well. And no doubt some of you will be listening and watching to the shorts and reels that we put out on all the various social channels and YouTube and so on. Please forward anything you get to hear about to us if you want us to cover it on a future topic, and tell your friends that we're here. Might be interesting for them to share as well. In the meantime, good luck with your business.